turn now to former Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, Chief Best, MSNBC law enforcement analyst now. So, Chief, let's start with 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant. Columbus Police, they've released this body cam video piece by piece since Tuesday. What's your analysis of what we've seen so far in this particular case, and what needs to happen next in this particular case?
Well, it's tragic. You know, that's the first thing that comes to mind is tragic. As you know, these incidents are often quickly evolving. Officers are trying to make life and death split-second decisions. So they're going to have to break. I do appreciate the fact that they got the video out there quickly so people could make some assessments about what was occurring. Obviously, people are very upset. But I think we're going to have to, see what potential was there for him to slow that situation down, if any. It's just horribly tragic. We always are working on tools. As you know, I was in law enforcement for almost 30 years, and I know that we need to work on tools on how to de-escalate and come into these situations and bring the temperature down when it's plausible to do so. So I think they're going to have to really evaluate, was that actually possible in this case to do so. Either way, it's a tragic incident, and there'll be a very thorough independent investigation looking at every single detail from the 911 call to the officer's approach, and then try to get any lessons learned that we can garner from this.
Chief, let me preface this next question by admitting I don't know whether officers in Columbus, Ohio actually have tasers. If they do have tasers, would using a taser in that situation, would that have been an option in terms of use of force or no?
Well, it's all very nuanced because it all depends on the circumstances. If you have time to reasonably get to your taser, if you have a taser officer there, then potentially you could use a taser to try to subdue the situation. But, again, it happened, it looks to me anyway, from my perspective, and, I have 30 years of experience, like things happen and evolve very quickly. So, again, not putting any, not making a determination about the outcome, but just saying it happened, evolved very quickly. And a taser might have been helpful if one had been available. And again, I don't know if they had one.
Chief, stand by for a moment if you can. I want to bring in NBC's Garrett Haake into the conversation because, Garrett, you're reporting that there appears to be some new optimism there on Capitol Hill today, that Republicans and Democrats may be close to some sort of an agreement on a police reform bill. What more can you tell us about that? Where are we seeing these new areas of agreement here?
Well, quite honestly, some of the change here isn't so much in changes in the various proposals that have been out there, but changes in the political environment, with Democrats now in control of the Senate and what legislation comes to the floor, and a Democrat in the White House who is much more amenable to dealing with this issue at all. There is, I think, an environment that is more conducive to compromise. And so while all of us on Capitol Hill have been focused on the insurrection and inauguration and the COVID package and so forth, the lawmakers who've been negotiating this, that's Tim Scott from the Republican side, Karen Bass and Cory Booker from the Democratic side, have been having these private conversations that they feel like are closer and closer to breakthroughs on a number of issues in which they weren't all that far apart in the first place. Things like banning chokeholds. The goal is the same, but the methods were different in their various bills. So how can they work together on that? Same with no-knock warrants. You go down the list. So there is kind of a spirit of optimism here that perhaps with the political temperature on this issue having turned down slightly in the way Washington is configured now, they may be closer to reaching something both sides could agree on.
You correct me here if I'm wrong. I spoke to Senator Scott several months ago, and he indicated that one of the biggest sticking points was qualified immunity. That being, if not one of the biggest sticking points, the biggest sticking point. Have they found some common on qualified immunity?
That remains the biggest sticking point, although Senator Scott said yesterday there's a proposal out there that may be the breakthrough. He is proposing essentially changing qualified immunity for police departments, if not individual officers. So folks who are the victims of police violence wouldn't necessarily be able to go out and sue that officer, but they might be able to go sue that department. And the argument from the Scott camp here is essentially that would put pressure on leadership to make the kind of changes necessary in departments without putting each individual officer in the same kind of financial jeopardy that might lead police officers to leave police forces. That may not be good enough for Democrats. There are a lot of activist groups, there are a number of Democratic lawmakers who really want to see that overhaul done completely on qualified immunity, but it's a starting point on what, again, had been, as you pointed out, the stickiest issue here.
All right, Garrett Hake there on the Hill. Garrett, thanks so much for that. And Chief, let me come back to you for a moment, building off what Garrett was just reporting. This idea of qualified immunity, does any meaningful police reform hinge on that issue? And if so, why?
Well, officers are particularly concerned about having extra liability when they're coming out and engaging in, like, as I talked about earlier, sometimes split-second decisions. And so they're very concerned about being vulnerable, personally vulnerable to those allegations, to those acts. So going into this profession, as tough as it is, you're often going into very tenuous situations. And so I do understand why officers are concerned about having some extra level of protection as they're out there. That said, it can't be a situation where they get a pass, right? So there has to be accountability. And I think all the demonstrations, all the marches, all the activists coming forward have pointed out very clearly that they want to make sure that there is some personal risk there for officers' actions. I think it's going to be a lot of finagling and a lot of discussion and compromise, but I do believe 100% they're going to be able to come to some middle-of-the-road decision that will benefit both sides of this issue.
Chief, I talked to a number of law enforcement officials there in Minneapolis when I was on the ground, and they indicated that while police reform legislation could very well be a great idea for not just the police, but the policed, this all seems to be having quite the effect on their ability to recruit and retain officers on the ground. Is that what you're hearing? Is that an experience that you've had as well? There are far fewer people that want to go into law enforcement?
It is absolutely true. I mean, a lot of agencies are experiencing this in significant numbers. Officers leaving because they don't feel appreciated, because they don't feel like the electeds of the community want them there. And so I know, particularly in Seattle, but in other areas as well, lots of officers have left the profession, and they are having a much more difficult time recruiting people. So that is the reality. It's a tough job. Again, I was there almost 30 years in policing. It's not an easy job. And there's a lot of controversy around it, a lot of issues around race and fairness and equity that need to still be meted out. And so it's a tough job coming in. And then if it's a thankless and tough job, it's just going to be a lot more difficult to get people to come into the ranks. I do think that there's still opportunity, though, to turn this around and to see some daylight and to make this the profession that we all want to see it to be in the country. So change is afoot, and we have to appreciate that. But it does create some recruiting challenges at this very moment.
Carmen Best, we'll leave it there. Thank you as always, Chief. Do appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.